Hey everyone, this is Nick and welcome to this Linux and open source news video. And you're gonna want to stick to at least the middle of the video because I have an announcement to make, but I'm not gonna make it right now. Let's just say it's about getting all the news, but without seeing my ugly face. So this week our main items are Apple being fined for privacy violations in France. We have new Mastodon users that arrived after the Twitter acquisition not necessarily sticking around, and we have Mozilla joining the Fediverse with their own Mastodon instance. And we also have this segue to today's sponsor. Thanks to Linode for sponsoring this video. Linode is my favorite solution to run a Linux or gaming server. It's what I use to run my own Nextcloud instance and my own OnlyOffice server. The interface is super easy to use. They are affordable, they have tons of documentation online, and they have one-click deployable servers for a ton of applications or games. Like Pi-hole. Pi-hole is a DNS sinkhole that filters out requests to ad-serving domains. Basically, it lets you block ads and improve network performance. It lets you actively monitor every DNS request made on your network and block requests as they come in. And you can deploy it in one click on Linode, so you can ensure I stay poor. And to get you started, Linode is giving you $100 of free credit to get your own Linux server or gaming server running. To get access to that, just click the link in the description below. Apple's marketing campaign might be hitting the privacy beats pretty hard, but it doesn't mean you should trust them on that front, as this new fine indicates. The French CNIL, for Commission Nationale de l'Informatique et des Libertés, or National Commission for Computer Science and Freedoms, just fined Apple for a measly 8 million euros, which isn't much, but is still a condemnation of the company's bad privacy practices. Apple was found to be illegally harvesting user data to target them with ads without proper consent. Apple apparently failed to obtain the consent of French iPhone users before depositing or writing identifiers used for advertising purposes on their phones in the App Store. Apple had already been fined in France last month for another €1 million for imposing abusive commercial clauses on French app developers for accessing the App Store. Now, of course, Apple will appeal this privacy decision, as they say they prioritize user privacy and that they do more than anyone else to provide users with a clear choice for personalized ads. Of course, that choice is only applied to third-party applications and not to Apple's own apps, as was evidenced in November last year. Turning iPhone analytics off won't stop Apple apps from collecting data and tracking you. Them saying they do more for privacy than anyone else is like saying I do more push-ups than my cat. It might technically be true, but if the baseline is 0, does it really matter? Still, pretty bad time to be an iPhone user. Elon Musk might be driving many new users to Mastodon with the way he's handling Twitter these days. And while that's great for the small Fediverse platform, it doesn't mean that everyone that starts using Mastodon sticks around. Since its peak back when Musk bought Twitter, the number of active Mastodon users declined by 30%, with about 1.8 million of them in early January, compared to 2.5 million in early December. Although this decrease might also be due to the holiday season, when people are with their families and not on their phones all that much. Still, it's normal to expect a decrease of users on a new platform, especially considering it grew from 500,000 users to 2 million by mid-November after the Musk acquisition. People were bound to return to Twitter or to stop using Mastodon altogether. And since Mastodon's growth can be directly linked to every decision Musk made, with a very clear impact with each new blunder, it's also normal that people would drop out because they didn't join for Mastodon, they joined for an alternative to Twitter, which Mastodon isn't completely. A lot of users are still sticking around, and Mastodon is actually doing extremely well in terms of user funding. They even refused a ton of potential investment from Silicon Valley venture capital. I'll have a dedicated video about Mastodon to help people move to it and understand how it works later next week or the week after that. Still on the Fediverse topics, this is something I missed at the end of 2022, but it looks like Mozilla is entering the Fediverse too. They'll be testing a publicly accessible instance called Mozilla.social in early 2023, which is going to be focused on Mastodon first. The move is part of their pledge for a healthy internet, which basically boils down to we would like people to not be bastards online and we want to promote an internet that makes that possible. Mozilla joins others like Vivaldi in offering Mastodon instances. Mastodon still seems like the only service most people are interested in on the Fediverse, which is a shame because stuff like PixelFed, Castopod, Worm or PeerTube are also in excellent shape. But I guess if the Mastodon experiment goes well for Mozilla, they might end up hosting a few instances for other services as well. I am all for more companies and non-profits joining the Fediverse, Mastodon and any other service. If you don't like these companies and non-profits, you don't use their instance and you can avoid interacting with their users. And if you do like them, they're kind of a seal of approval, a guarantee that gives you an instance that you can trust. It's way easier for someone to sign up for a service that's on mozilla.social than something that's hosted by someone you don't know at the other end of the world that you don't really trust. Okay, you've been patient, here is the announcement! Well, these Linux and open source news videos are now also available in audio podcast form. In these podcasts, I cover the same topics but more in depth and with more personal opinions, and I also cover more topics that just don't fit in the length of a regular Linux and open source news video. It is hosted on Castopod, which means it's part of the Fediverse. You can follow it using Mastodon, for example, but there's also an RSS feed to add it to any podcast client you might add, and it's also on iTunes and Spotify. The link to access the website is in the description below. Using the website is also pretty cool because there's a comment section where you can let me know your feedback about the podcast and we can discuss the various topics that I mentioned, which is also pretty nice. Okay, now back to the topics at hand. Last week I talked about a full AMD desktop from Slimbook. Well, this week we have a full AMD laptop from System 76. They announced their new Pangolin laptop, which now uses AMD CPUs and GPUs. The new laptop doesn't have a release date just yet, but it will be a 15-inch device. It will have at least a full HD 144Hz display with a Ryzen 7 6800U coupled with a Radeon 680M GPU. It has a 70 Wh battery and weighs 1.8 kilograms, so it's not like it's an ultrabook or anything. And of course, you get the usual slots for M.2 SSDs up to 16 terabytes. You have DDR5 RAM, you have a nice port selection, and the usual potato 720p webcam, unfortunately. The chassis seems to have been changed compared to the previous model, and battery life should be a lot better, up to 10 hours compared to 6 hours for the previous generation. The graphics chip shouldn't be anything incredible, with performance about in line with the GTX 1050 Ti, but at least it's an AMD dedicated GPU, and this means better Linux compatibility, still with some performance available for video editing workflows, 3D modeling, or other compute-intensive tasks. They didn't announce all the configurations or all the options you could have, but it looks like an interesting laptop. And for once, I might be able to review it, because I've been talking more with System 76 lately since I reviewed their keyboards on the channel, and so they're probably going to send me a review unit for this one, which is pretty cool. Now, yet another privacy breach, and this time from Google, allegedly, accompanied by a small measly settlement of $23 million. Google agreed to pay that amount to settle a decade-long lawsuit that was opened in California in 2010. This suit still needs court approval and concerns the fact that Google, allegedly, shared search terms that consumers had typed in the search engine with advertisers and third-party vendors without permission. That happened on the web and on Android, and when the user clicked on any link, their personal information was also apparently disclosed to said third parties. And the lawsuit also alleges that these third parties paid Google to have more information about which search-related factors led the user to click on a specific link or not. So this would mean that Google sold private personal data, but also sold all the previous history and the decisions the user made that made them click on a specific link. And so this means that Google would have violated the Stored Communications Act, which is a US federal law. Google had already tried to settle the case for $8.5 million in 2013, but that settlement fell through because of decisions in another case, which basically means that they were convicted of something similarly shady which convinced the opposing lawyers that they had a shot at a bigger amount. And look, Google settling this case isn't an admission of guilt. But it kinda is, because even with such a measly amount, they dragged this lawsuit for more than 10 years. Why would they settle now? It's basically admitting that, yes, okay, you know what, we're gonna pay you so you stop bothering us with our privacy violations. Which reminds us that whether you're an Apple user or an Android user, you're not private and it all sucks. Now, if you thought GNOME developers never listened to users or did whatever they wanted, well, this new initiative might be interesting to you. They're introducing a new extension called Focus Indicator, which is meant for users to be able to preview a potential change in GNOME 44, which is the removal of the application name menu in the top panel, and its replacement by a new animation when changing which window is focused. This application name menu initially contained basically everything the hamburger menu now contains on GNOME apps, and it also served for the user to know which app was focused at the moment. But since all the contents of this menu are now basically useless, only letting you quit the app or show its details in GNOME software, this menu doesn't really serve that much of a purpose. And the GNOME design team also says it's not clear what it does. Is it a task switcher, a shortcut to an application, or something else? They say it's basically not comprehensible, and so they're testing its replacement with an animation instead. When focusing a new window, it will have a small zoom in and out effect to indicate to the user that it is indeed in focus. It's pretty cool that they're letting users test this out and give feedback, and I guess it's a good use of the extensions mechanism. And it also lets you tweak the animation parameters if you want. Now, in its current state, I have zero problems with that menu being removed. It serves no purpose. I literally never clicked on it once to do anything with the currently focused application. I would prefer if they made that menu more useful, like with the contents of the hamburger menu like it used to have, or even with the full menu bar on applications that still have one, but if they're not going to improve it, they might as well get rid of it. It serves no purpose. There are some good news on the Unity desktop environment front. They are now working on the ability to run it under Wayland. This new variant is called Unity X, and it has all the same features as Unity 7, but with the ability to run it with any window manager you want, replacing or removing the panel, and more. Unity X is basically exactly like the current Unity, but with the ability to mix and match components, something you can't do in the current Unity version. It is already available on GitLab, but it will have convenient packages in the next Ubuntu Unity and Manjaro Unity releases. Now the dash works and looks as you would expect, but you can adjust the opacity of it. The HUD that lets you search through menu bar entries is now independent from the dash, and it supports more applications than the regular Unity HUD, and it can also be opened in multiple apps at the same time. The control center is the same, but has options to change more settings than in the default Unity, and there's a new YAML file that you can edit to replace the window manager, the panel, the settings daemon, and more. Now, seeing that Unity X has all the same features, but more and better compared to the regular Unity version, I don't really know why they keep working on the regular Unity instead of just working on Unity X, but I guess there's something I might be missing. Still, it's good to have this because more modularity means more distributions might be able to ship an implementation of Unity instead of having to stick to the current very rigid desktop that it offers. And on to the gaming news with the release of Proton Next 7.0-6, letting you test the newest advancements and making a bunch of games playable like the Uncharted Legacy of Thieves collection, Gotham Knights, or Heroes of the Dark. Proton Experimental, the even more alpha quality testing release, also fixes a bunch of stuff like alt-tabbing being broken on GNOME 43, various performance tweaks and improvements, and letting Halo Infinite run, even though there are still plenty of graphical issues with NVIDIA hardware. If you like emulation, Dolphin, the Wii and GameCube emulator, is going to get a nice big performance boost using Vulkan. They will be using the Vulkan memory allocator to better handle graphical RAM, and this should result in performance being massively better, especially for Super Mario Galaxy, which should be able to reach 140 FPS on the Steam Deck instead of around 80. Most games should see better performance, but not necessarily of that magnitude. And a while back, someone decided to start working on a new open source NVIDIA driver for Vulkan, based on what Nvidia opened up earlier in 2022. This driver, called NVK, was to be a replacement for Nouveau, starting fresh without needing reverse engineering, but it couldn't really run anything at the time. Well, now it can run video games. The developer posted a screenshot of the Talos Principle running, although at a pretty abysmal frame rate, namely 5 FPS, but it can still render the game, which is nice. The developer already knows how to fix that performance issue and is working on it. I am so glad to see a modern open source driver for Nvidia making strides. It probably will not be completely fully production usable before the end of the year, I would not expect it to be, but still, it's insane that in just a few months they managed to get a game completely rendered using Vulkan with a brand new driver started from scratch. It's cool. And it's also cool that it only took me minutes to create this segue to today's sponsor. If you're looking for a new computer to run Linux on, stop buying Windows devices and installing Linux on top of it and praying that it works. Just buy a computer that was designed to run Linux, from Tuxedo, for example, which is today's sponsor. They're based in Germany, but they ship worldwide, and they have products for basically every price point and every need, whether you're looking for a laptop or a desktop, for a small, affordable Ultrabook, or for a super decked out workstation that's never gonna leave your desk. They have it. They're customizable, they're repairable, they're upgradable, and you can have your own super key on the keyboard of your laptop, your own custom keyboard layout as well, or your own logo on the lid of your laptop or engraved on your desktop as well. They have tons of options. So if you need a new computer you want to run Linux on, check out the link in the description below and buy one from Tuxedo. They're really, really good. So, thanks everyone for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, don't hesitate to like, to subscribe, to turn on notifications, to write a comment. And if you didn't like it, there's the dislike button and the comment section below as well. And if you want to support the channel, there's a PayPal link in the description, there's a super thanks button underneath this YouTube video, and there are links to my Patreon page and my YouTube memberships page. Both get access to a weekly podcast and the right to vote on the next topics that I'll cover. So thanks everyone for watching, and I guess you'll see me in the next one. Bye!